Hello and welcome to Canvas the Niger-Delta Roundtable, where I discuss the future of the Niger-Delta region. Every week we give time to reflecting on topics relevant to the development of the region and her people. On this edition, once again, we focus on how to take the Niger-Delta to a more promising future. The program is sponsored by the operator of the NNPC and the SPDC, Total Energies Active Joint Venture, the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, headquartered in Port Harcourt. Thank you for joining. I'm Adedayo Ilushakin. On this edition of Canvas, and I will discussing the essence of democracy in commemoration of International Democracy Day, which comes on September 15 annually. On this edition of Canvas, and I will exploring the fundamental principles that underpin democratic societies. Democracy is more than just a system of government. It's a way of life that values freedom, equality, and participation. We will discuss the core elements that make democracy work, such as free and fair elections, the rule of law, the protection of human rights. We'll also hear from an expert about his experiences and perspectives on living in a democratic society. Join us as we delve into the challenges and triumphs of democracy around the world and consider how we can all contribute to strengthening democratic values in our own communities. Again, on this edition, we're discussing the essence of democracy. My guest is Henry Ekine. Now, Henry Ekine is a legal practitioner of several years post-call experience. He has interest in human rights, women and children rights, constitutional law, democracy, rule of law, good governance, sustainable development, as well as general litigation. He is the Principal Counsel at Ekine Co. He is also the National Legal Advisor of the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, CDHR. Henry Ekine, hello and welcome to Canvas and Niger-Delta Roundtable.
Oh, Dio, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great to have you here once again. Let's start on this note. What are the core principles that define a democratic society?
I would say that a democratic society or democracy will have the people at the very foundation of any consideration of democracy or a democratic society before we even would determine what principles that would exist to indicate whether there is democracy or otherwise. The people is at the center, you would say, because democracy, even the roots word, will mean that there are people and then there is a rule. So the rule by the people, and of course that rule is for the people. So the people essentially is at the core and the very foundation of democracy. And then how does this now translate to the other principles of democracy? The people would have to have a choice, so there has to be some freedom for them to be able to exercise that right to choose between options, including those who govern them. And then they would also have to participate in a process that will select those who govern them, which is the election. But I've always said that periodic elections alone do not define democracy, because those elections have to be free and fair. Then again, the people will have to have a right to be able to participate in the affairs that determine form their government. And then in that process, you would have to have them participate freely. And then you also would have the people decide what they desire to have. Because essentially, the purpose of every government is to continually enhance the welfare of citizens and then to provide or secure their lives and their property. So essentially, in all considerations, you find the people. And in that process of also exercising the right to make choice of who leads them, there may be disagreements or dissatisfaction of the outcome of the process, which we talked about election. And that's where you would have to have some sort of an arbitration or a process of resolving those disagreements or dissatisfactions. So the court will come in, and that's the judiciary. So the judiciary would have to be clearly independent and, of course, functional. So the fundamental principles of democracy would therefore include the rights of citizens, fundamental freedoms and rights, independent judiciary, periodic elections that will enable them to make choices, and of course, a whole lot of other principles that would define democracy.
I'm sure we'll get to those in a moment. Now, if you say at the core or the heart of democracy or democratic society is the people, and democracy is intended to serve the interests of the people, how is democracy able to achieve this if at times, or maybe even all the time, the interests of people vary, their expectations are different, and may not or will not always align, or we may not always be on the same page. How can democracy then serve all our interests if it's about the people?
And that's where the concept of majority comes in understanding democracy and democratic ideals. So you would have a situation where while the people have divergent expectations and of course even their interests conflicting, then you will have to put this into some process of making a choice as which way to go. And then you find a situation where the people will get into election and then to get by way of determining which proportion of the population will determine what option that will be acceptable by the people at the time. And by that way, you have those who will be in majority as a greater proportion of the population determining which way to go, and including even the selection of those who are going to determine the affairs of the people. That's by way of election to elect the leaders. So you have conflicting interests even in deciding what to do at some point. The citizens are expected to always participate, and that's why some societies you have concepts such as referendum to be able to determine what steps to take to addressing certain challenges of the people and what's acceptable or not acceptable by the people. But at all times, as human beings, we would have divergent expectations and aspirations. But democracy enables the people to resolve those differences by way of elections and then by way of determining what proportion of the population in terms of majority that will resolve that problem. So that's one way that democracy would essentially resolve conflicting interests and aspirations of people.
You've mentioned elections severally in the course of the conversation thus far. How do these free and fair elections contribute to the essence of democracy? And can there be democracy without these free and fair elections?
There can be democracy without an opportunity for the people to express themselves by way of election, that periodic election, as the case may be regularly. Because elections create the opportunity for the citizens to make a choice out of the options that exist. And so democratic principles and democracy give the citizens that right. And of course, don't forget that sovereignty actually lies in the people in a democratic society. So it's the people that will determine who governs them and determine what processes of government that would be acceptable by them, and also determine what the outcomes of the activities and actions of those who govern them would be. That's why you would have to continue to participate in the process of influencing even government decisions and policies post-election. So that creates an opportunity for the citizens to always determine what is right for them and then what is not acceptable by them. And it's only in a democratic society, arguably, that you have that opportunity for choice and that opportunity for, if you like, periodic elections, and that opportunity for citizens to continually express their rights. If you contrast this, the situation where citizens do not make any contribution as to who is going to determine the affairs that govern them, by way of probably some despotic or tyrannical leader who probably didn't even emerge by the instrumentality of the people making a choice, or not even giving any opportunity for the people to direct these own ways of activities and actions in government, then you arguably you say democracy is not in that society. But that's not to say that monarchical systems are not democratic, where perhaps those who are probably the heads of such monarchies that are not usually elected are not democratic, because there is another form of arrangement where they will have elected structures that will run the affairs of government, whilst you still have the monarchical system operational also, where the head of that government as the monarch.
Interestingly, every time, or almost every time, you've mentioned elections, once again in the course of this conversation, you usually preface it with free and fair. In societies then where there have been challenges with the conduct of elections, or where elections are perceived to not have been conducted in a free and fair manner, as has been alleged to even happen in our society, in the Nigerian space, or even the Niger-Delta for that matter, when we've had these periodic elections, where there are such challenges, can that society be said to be democratic in nature?
Certainly not. that society can't be democratic in nature. It's apparent because it meant that those citizens did not have the opportunity to freely express their right to make choices.
What is it then, if not a democracy?
It's a pretentious one, even where that society professes to be a democratic society. At some point, described the Nigerian state, for example, in such situations as an aspiring democracy. You're pretending to be a democratic society, but in real terms, the principles, the defining principles and ideals of democracy are absent. And very fundamental is that opportunity for citizens to express themselves in this manner by way of elections. So if the elections are not seen to be credible and they're not fair, and of course they didn't give opportunity for citizens to participate, either disenfranchised or done in such a way that's not in compliance with the provisions of the laws and regulations and other instruments that guide the process of election, then you hardly would imagine that society is a democratic society. And then even not having the option for citizens to form associations, that's a multi-party system. So arguably, if you have a single party system, it's far from being truly a democratic state.
Why is citizen participation so crucial in a democracy? I mean, couldn't we simply have maybe, I don't know, a handful of people who maybe know better and in the interest of everyone make decisions that favor everyone? Why is it crucial for citizens or everyone to be a part of the process?
It's important because of the liberal nature of democracy, creating a wider opportunity for citizens to participate. But when you have a situation where a single person, that could be another form of government, where a single person assumes power by some maybe might or power of some few individuals organizing themselves into some sects of governance structure, and then not minding, not giving consideration to what's the option, the thoughts of the people would be, then you're not being democratic really. So it's important and very crucial that citizens will at all times, that's very fundamental in democracy, that citizens will have the opportunity to form a government, and then also not just to form a government, to continue to monitor and then ensure that there's always accountability, responsibility, answerability to the expectations and aspirations of the citizens. Where that is not achievable, then they also should have a right to change the government.
How then can individuals get more involved in the democratic process? You've said before at the start or at about the start of this conversation that democracy is more than just periodic elections. Expectedly, citizens should be a part of these periodic elections. But once again, you say it's more than that. So beyond being a part of the elections whenever they do happen, how else can citizens or individuals be more involved in the democratic process?
And that's where the fundamental rights of citizens as guaranteed in the constitutions of countries and other international instruments on human rights with respect to freedom of expression becomes very important as a defining tenet of democracy. That citizens should always have the right to express themselves and then to also influence public policy and then even activities of government. So post-election period, you find citizens organizing themselves in some pressure groups or civil society organizations, or even as individuals, expressing themselves in dissatisfaction to certain policies or activities of government, or even in support to certain policies and activities of government. So in that regard, you find that citizens continue to participate in shaping the affairs of governance and then in determining issues that govern them post-election. So it's not at all times that you would have the opportunity to decide about what's happening to you or society, or to direct or influence the policies of government by elections. So post-election period, you'll find that citizens will organize themselves in ways that will create the opportunities to express themselves. And that's why it's a fundamental tenet of democracy, like I said, for citizens' rights to freedom of expression by different means, maybe the media, and different platforms. It could be as individuals or as groups. And then across societies that are democratic, it's argued that the system, the government, should allow citizens to carry out such strategies of expression. It could be by protest, it could be by other forms, maybe a referendum. They organize themselves to elect, to choose whether a particular decision of government is acceptable by the people or not before the next period of election.
Let's talk rule of law now. And I know you like that. You like when rule of law is mentioned or discussed. You live for the rule of law. Being a member of civil society yourself, what is the rule of law, and what roles does it play in maintaining a democratic society?
Yeah, excellent. You would imagine that there are legal frameworks that will regulate all of the processes of government and even the formation of government, and then the fundamental of which would be the constitution of that country, and then other enactments, and even principles and standards, some universal. Now, the rule of law, we mean the predominance and supremacy of these laws, as distinguished from arbitrariness and, if you like, discretion of individuals to prevail in every circumstance or every situation that's got to do with the rights of the people. So a situation where citizens conduct themselves in defiance, or if like in disobedience or in disregard of the extant provisions of law, then there is absence of rule of law. So fundamentally, rule of law, we mean holding the laws of the society above the powers and the individualities of some, if you like, leaders who have found themselves in position to determine the affairs of the people. It doesn't matter how powerful you are. It doesn't matter what position you occupy. But what should be prominent should be the provisions of the laws. And of course, the laws here, like I said, will include the constitutions that are made by the people, the enactments of the legislature, and even the pronouncements of the court. So obedience to the pronouncements of the courts, in most cases, the very highest level of the court, the apex court. In Nigeria, for example, the Supreme Court. So the pronouncements and decisions of the Supreme Court in themselves, in the school of law, it's law itself. So when you put all of these, a combination of these instruments should at all times govern the actions of government and then the activities of government and even citizens themselves. So the absence of this would be the absence of rule of law. And fundamentally as well, rule of law is a principle of democracy. It is only expected that for there to be a democratic society, then there has to be respect for laws. There has to be respect for the instruments that define the governance structure and even the activities of those who are in government. Otherwise, you will have a situation where those who are in government will run the affairs of state as they will without giving any consideration to the provisions of the law.
In a democratic society or system, are there persons who are above the law? Does the rule of law suggest or include that the law may not apply to everyone all the time equally?
No, not at all. The sub-elements of rule of law will include equality, impartiality, and an independent judiciary. So no individual is above the law. No individual is classed above the law. No individual is even above the other individual. It doesn't even matter the position you occupy. And that's why the constitutions of countries, including that of Nigeria, vest power, sovereignty in the people, not in Mr. President, not in Mr. Governor, because it's likened to the origin of government, where the political philosophers will explain the origin of government in this manner, that there was a time in human nature or in society where power, strength, might defined who got what, how did get what. So if I were powerful, to the extent that I measure my power, that I could just come to you and take your property away, I just would do so. And as I take it away from you, perhaps before I get to the next point, another person who is more powerful will probably come and take it away from me. And what clearly happened in society at that time was that there was chaos, crisis, conflict. So life was generally brutish, short, because people could kill at will to get what they wanted. But we saw that that kind of situation wasn't acceptable and then wasn't good for humanity. So we needed to contribute some aspect, some element of the powers we individually possessed or had into a central individual, and then allow that person to control our affairs, so to speak. So it means that that single individual, whether it is Mr. President today or Mr. Governor today, doesn't have a power of his own, but it's a contribution of the little elements of power from every citizen. So sovereignty still lies in the people themselves, and then they would have to, you can't be above the law, you can't be above the people. And the laws that are made also to govern such processes of government and control those individuals.
But you do find that in certain instances, and we have several examples, that some persons appear or seem above the law. How then can we ensure that the laws are applied equally to all citizens?
You need a fair and independent judiciary as number one, and then you need strong institutions that will not look at who is involved or the personality of any individual at all. So that's why it's said generally that in democratic societies where the rule of law is observed, and then of course the judiciary is clearly independent, and then the judges are also incorruptible, that citizens' rights will not be undermined, and then those who are in leadership position will clearly be checked of their excesses and inadequacies. So the way for me to address that is to ensure at all times that our judiciary is clearly independent, and then we have as judges those who are incorruptible, believably so, and then of course who have strong institutions that will just uphold the law and not actually yielding to personalities, and then, if you like, those who are politically exposed individuals.
How does democracy protect and promote human rights? Because once again, you find, there are always going to be those individuals who, for whatever reason, maybe because of political position or because of social status or because of financial might, believe that they can flout the law, they can break the law, or they are above the law and they can act however way they want, or forcefully dispossess other persons of their belongings, even though that's not supposed to be the case right now, because democracy provides some kind of order in our society. But we still have these persons, these individuals. How does democracy ensure everyone is protected and all rights are protected?
Human rights survives on the principle of equality and non-discrimination. And then democracy, in essence, promotes the principle of equality. And that way, democracy protects the rights of citizens. So a democratic society is a society that gives opportunity for citizens to be able to enjoy certain universal standards of what is described as rights. And then a democratic society is one where, like we have established, would have those strong institutions and then independent judiciary to be able to enforce or defend the rights of citizens when citizens approach those institutions. So yes, they have guaranteed rights of citizens, but where the society is not democratic, where the institutions are weak, where individuals determine the direction of rights of citizens, and where judges are corruptible, then of course the rights of citizens are actually facing serious threats. So in societies where citizens can freely enforce their rights and also enjoy the protection of their rights, because it's the duty of states, positive duty of states, to ensure the protection of rights of citizens and then the enforcement of rights of citizens. And where this is not present, then of course democracy would have failed. So democracy actually as a system of government where citizens participate continually, and then where citizens also influence the policies of government, where citizens have their rights to be protected, and where institutions are stronger than individuals. That is, of course, the predominance of the law, as explained earlier. And then where the judiciary is also independent and strong, then the rights of citizens can be protected. But otherwise, then there will be a threat to the rights of citizens.
This canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable. On this edition, we are discussing the essence of democracy. My guest is Henry Ekine. We have to go for a break now. However, we will return in a moment. Our conversation will continue. Do please stay with us.
Our yellow and black markers indicate pipeline and flow line right-of-way boundaries. Your activity could impact on the buried high-pressure hydrocarbon pipelines and flow lines, leading to possible leaks and explosion. Please keep off. Do not engage in sand mining or any form of excavation, pipeline vandalism, oil theft, and bush burning within pipeline and flow line right-of-way. Do not farm, trade, or locate any business on pipeline and flow line right-of-way. It is against the law to apportion land, sell, or build on pipeline and flow line right-of-way. Maintain a setback distance of at least 30 meters or about 100 feet from the right-of-way boundaries always. We care for your safety and that of the environment.
This message is brought to you by the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, SPDC, operator of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPC Limited, Total Energies, and Ajib Joint Venture.
Hello and welcome back. Still conversing Niger-Delta Roundtable. I'm Dial. The essence of democracy is what we're discussing on this edition in commemoration of International Democracy Day. My guest is a lawyer, a member of civil society, Henry Ekine. Henry, good to have you here once again.
Yes, thank you, Dial.
Democracies, even our democracy in Nigeria and the Niger-Delta here is fraught with challenges. What are the biggest challenges facing democracies today, and especially our democracy, as it were?
Considering the principles of democracy and the tenets, and then what we have considered thus far, then the greatest threat to democracy is the absence of the rule of law, absence of fundamental rights, or if you like, the violation of rights of citizens. That's a serious threat to democracy. And then, of course, the susceptibility of the people to individual control of those who are exposed to power. And practically, in reality, in Nigeria, in the Nigerian context, the impoverishment of the people, the poor level of education of the people, illiteracy and lack of enlightenment and knowledge of the rights of citizens. These are serious threats to democracy in developing countries. And then, in a way, it's been observed that politically exposed persons and leaders deliberately orchestrate their policies and activities of government to continually impoverish the people and then keep them ignorant of even their own rights, and then denying them the opportunities to participate in the affairs of government. And so democracy becomes just utopic, and then the society is probably just one that is professing to be a democratic society, but really is not. So in the Nigerian context, and even this part of the country, the greatest threat to Nigeria, to democracy, I would feel, and I would say, would include these absence or lack of awareness of the people, the apparent violation of rights of citizens, and then weak institutions, and the absence of economic powers of the citizens. Don't forget, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, for instance, laid the foundation that Nigeria is established on the basis of democracy and social justice. But in essence, the fundamental principles to guide our policies, which would have strengthened the rights of citizens and that democratic ideal, are absent. Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, that contained all of the aspirations of Nigerians that would have indeed consolidated the democracy in this country, have been made to be non-justiciable. So citizens just live at the mercy of politically exposed persons. So the economic rights, the social rights, the cultural rights of citizens cannot be enforced. They are non-justiciable in the Nigerian context. So the right to harness economic resources, the right to employment, the right to healthcare, the right to education, the right to clean environment, And those very essential existential rights of citizens have been made to be non-justiciable. That's a significant threat to democracy in a Nigerian context. So even while Section 14 of the Constitution was to the extent that Nigeria is based on the principles of democracy and social justice, but there is no social justice.
Earlier on, you mentioned that democracies or societies lacking in certain elements can be referred to as democracies that at best they are pretentious, or aspiring democracies, as it were. Can the word democracies even be used to describe any society, or can the word democratic be used, in describing any society with these challenges? The first part of my question now. And also, how can democracies with these issues address other issues such as corruption, misinformation, political polarization? How can they deal with such issues?
Yes, indeed. Part of the principles or tenets of democracy would include transparency and accountability, answerability. So the absence of these elements in itself is an indication that there is no democracy. And then a democratic society, or rather a society that is lacking in these tenets and principles, whether we can rightly say it's a democratic society, I think it's probably just because of the presence of some of the other indicators of a democratic system or a democratic society. Okay, yes, there are periodic elections. Though we have established that periodic elections alone do not establish a democratic society, but there are periodic elections. There's multi-party system. You look at some of those semblance of the tenets or principles of democracy as existent in those societies, then of course we could then probably classify that society as an aspiring democracy. Not being clearly a society that is, if you like, devoid completely of all of the elements of democracy, then it could be an aspiring democracy. What is rather left is to consolidate those principles that would make the society more democratic. And that's the situation that Nigeria finds itself. We've had situations where we've had elections, periodic elections, but they are largely elections that are skewed. They are not free, they are not fair, they are not credible. We have had situations where there are those institutions, even the legal frameworks and institutions for the protection of rights of citizens. But rights of citizens have rather continually been violated by state agents and even non-state agents. Then you find situations where, there are aspirations as contained under Chapter 2 that would have made the citizens feel that they have the right to participate, and then the right to equality and non-discrimination, all provided in the Constitution, but they are not given effect. So you could therefore describe Nigeria as rather an aspiring society, a democratic society, but not a real democratic society. But that puts also the question, is that truly really a real democratic society in the world? Or are there variants of democracy? It's been argued, and then some schools of thought have identified that there are probably variants of democracy, maybe the African variant, maybe the Western variant, and probably the communist variant of democracy. But in all of these, the principles are similar, whether it's in Africa or in the communist societies or in the Western liberal societies. But whatever it is, the absence of those fundamental principles of democracy will mean the absence of democracy in that society. And how then do we fix these challenges that threaten democracy in society, even in Nigeria? I think it's about the will of the people to be able to speak up, speak out, and defend their rights, and by extension, defend democracy, and ensure that those principles of democracy are given respect in some way. But how do you do this? When state agents, also the practical situation in Nigeria is, even when the citizens would want to demand for better governance, the citizens will want to demand for real democratic society and principles and tenets, then the politically exposed persons would even turn to use state instruments and state agents to descend on citizens, sometimes arrest and detain citizens unlawfully, and then even prevent citizens from expressing themselves, like the examples we have had in Nigeria recently. At some point when citizens felt that it was imperative to, if you like, check the excesses of certain state agents, and then the End SARS protest was organized by Nigerians, that would have been their right to participate in governance, to influence government policies. But the states descended on citizens. And just recently, the Economic Court of Justice, that's ECOWAS Court of Justice, decided in the matter between some NSTAD citizens and the Nigerian state that the citizens were denying their rights. Rights of citizens were violated, and compelled Nigeria to ensure that those state agents were apprehended and, of course, prosecuted and gets back to the community court to give a report. But as if that wasn't enough, just recently, when citizens felt there was need to express themselves on the hashtag End Bad Governance protest, because there's hardship. Remember, I mentioned here that the instrumentalities of impoverishing the people, denying the rights of citizens, and of course violating the fundamental rights of citizens, and even disobedience of orders of court and violation of law by state agents and persons who are politically exposed or public office holders, meant bad governance. The primary purpose of government would have been to continually enhance the welfare of citizens, and citizens are going through very excruciating difficulty and denial of even the rights of existence. But the states clamped down on citizens. As we speak, there are citizens who are being arrested and detained every day with some trumped-up charges, but primarily because of their participation in the NSAS governance protest. So those are very significant threats to democracy. And then how do you fix it? Citizens would want to deliberately ensure that their society becomes more democratic by demanding for better governance, by ensuring that their rights are protected, and by also demanding that institutions are indeed established to be strong and above the discretions of individuals.
The digital age offers enormous opportunities for advancement across various fields of human endeavor, but it has also come with its own fair share of challenges as well, sometimes even truncating the advancement that is supposed to promise. Misinformation, disinformation is rife, deep fake, fake videos, artificial intelligence has its own challenges as well. Humanity probably has never been as polarized as we are now due to the advent of the digital age. What does this portend for the future of democracy, especially in our society, one that is, you've described more or less as even an aspiring one?
The new media and then digital technology presents a mix of promoting democracy and then being a threat to democracy. Promoting democracy is in the sense that it provides enormous opportunity and platform for citizens to participate in governance, for citizens to express themselves, for citizens to even get feedback to government as to the activities of government and then the policies of government. And then on the other hand, it's been abused. And then that abuse threatens also the rights of other citizens, because it's a cliche that where your right ends is where the right of another citizen begins. So the new media and digital technology has been used somehow for the wrong purposes, or rather violating rights of citizens. And then, of course, also denying the citizens the opportunity to freely participate in governance, especially when there are regulations in that regard by the state. Just situations where the state may legislate to control the use of the new media, or even to circumscribe the citizens in such a way that they will not be able to access the new media for their participation in governance. Just recently, the Nigeria state launched an app, I think, that was intended to be for a feedback from citizens for government reaction in terms of policy and activities of government. But whether that is deliberate or whether it is intended to actually get the feedback from citizens for that purpose, or intended to get citizens to know which citizens are criticizing government for the possible, if you like, trumped up charges, which is exactly what has happened. So it's a mix of advantage and disadvantage in the use of the social media or all other forms of digital technology.
How can technology, still on technology, how can it be used to enhance democratic participation and transparency, which is also at the heart of a democratic process?
Like I mentioned, the advantage of the use of technology and the new media is expanding the frontiers for citizens' participation. So you can use new media and digital technology to expand the participation of citizens in the affairs of government. Also increasing the number of citizens that will have access to those platforms, and then of course contributing their aspirations, or like they are expressing their views with respect to government policies and all that. And then we talked about elections repeatedly in this discourse, and digital technology would have been a very veritable instrument for providing the opportunity for citizens to participate in the elections and to also make elections credible. It's been an argument in Nigeria, for instance, that the elections in Nigeria over the years since 1999 have been clearly squeezed, and then not transparent, not credible, and then of course conducted in apparent disregard of the rules that govern the elections. That is the Electoral Act, the Constitution, and even the guidelines of the Commission. But if digital technology is employed in conducting our elections and creating more opportunity for citizens to participate, I think it will be an advantage. There are a lot of citizens that are usually disenfranchised and then are unable to participate in elections because of the crisis that are associated with the election, political violence, whether it is pre-election, during election, or post-election violence. So these threats will keep citizens away from participating in election. And by that way, is limiting the scope or the proportion of citizens that would have participated in elections in determining who would govern them. But with deploying technology and then digital technology, it's expected, that's the argument, and I subscribe to that argument, that democracy will be sustained and probably strengthened because citizens will have greater participation in that regard.
What do political scientists, experts, members of those in the civil society space, such as yourself, what are your thoughts? What do you have to say on the health of our democracy? Do we even have an appreciation for democracy at all in our society?
Nigerian democracy is ailing. It's in the intensive care units, if I would give that illustration, because of we have identified here that the institutions are weak, citizens' rights are to a large extent violated, there's impunity and disregard for the rule of law. So the health of democracy in this country is rather a weak one. The Nigerian democracy is ailing, and then it's in the intensive care unit. And I think we need to do everything to be able to revive our democracy and strengthen our democracy and give it a good health condition. So apparently, I think political scientists should diagnose the Nigerian democracy and then find solutions to it.
Speaking of finding solutions, what solutions would you recommend? How can we revive this, as you put it, ailing democracy that's in the ICU currently? But how can education and civic engagement strengthen democratic values?
Public enlightenment, civil engagement, and then political education of citizens is very important. And I think primarily this should be done by the political parties and then, of course, the Electoral Commission. those are the primary institutions that have been established for the purposes of conducting elections, for instance. So in that regard, then political parties have a primary responsibility to continue to give civil education, political education, enlightenment to citizens. Then civil society organizations and human rights organizations should continue to educate and enlighten the citizens on their rights. Where we succeed in instilling this, internalizing this very important knowledge in citizens in terms of the rights of citizens, being aware of their rights, and then the political parties also promoting political education to the citizens, then I think in that regard, citizens will be better equipped in terms of participation through elections. Then again, citizens should continue to demand for strong institutions, and then ensure that we put more pressure on state actors to ensure that the institutions are strengthened. And then the judiciary would have to be more upright. I think we need to demand more from the judiciary, because the judiciary would have been the arbiter, so to speak, between the legislature and the executive, and then to put a check to the excesses of both institutions that at the moment drive or shape the democratic experience we have in this country. So we need to have a more independent judiciary, and then with incorruptible judges, and citizens need to make that demand, I think, with more determination. But again, that will require a number of reviews of our laws, and then even also repositioning of our institutions in terms of some restructuring. And then our legislations are very fundamental, including the Electoral Act, to be able to address those mischiefs that we've observed during elections. We have still, even though we had made attempts to improve on our Electoral Act, but I think there are still areas of improvement that we need to, including the Constitution. We need to also look at possible alterations or provisions of the Constitution to be able to strengthen and deepen our democracy.
Again, you described our democracy as being aspirational, pretentious. You say it's ailing and is currently in the ICU. Is there any hope of our democracy getting well, recovering, leaving the ICU, blossoming, prospering, and go from pretentious to actual, real democracy, that one that every Nigerian will be proud of? Is there any hope of that?
Yeah, there is hope, but not on the premise of what we have at the moment, to just let things go the way they are, and then we just proclaim that there will be hope. I think we need to work out that hope. We need to work out that expectation. And then that has to be a collective determination by Nigerians to work out that hope and that determination. Because at the moment, the system is so orchestrated, so designed to, if you like, to continually destroy our democracy. In fact, there is a conspiracy, there's a perceivable conspiracy of the political elite in this country, and it has transcended the political elite to also include the capitalists, the business elites, and even the security agencies and the judiciary. And that's a serious threat to our democracy, where now appointments into the judiciary of judicial officers appear to be shrouded with some high level of favoritism and nepotism. Relatives of politically exposed persons are the ones that have been appointed into judicial offices, and that's deliberate. Is to prepare the judiciary ahead of the elections. Because what has become the outcomes of Nigerian elections, that almost every election there are going to be the tribunals and then the courts. So the judiciary will play a role in determining who is truly elected, other than the citizens. And so when the political elites in that conspiracy get their nephews and nieces and uncles and children and wives and husbands in those positions, they're certainly going to be the ones that will constitute those tribunals. The same, the capitalists have also got into this conspiracy with the political elite to ensure that the citizens don't get the best of democracy, really. So we have to actually get to work together on this. So the hope is slim, but I think there is hope.
And that's it for this edition of Canvas the Niger-Delta Roundtable. We have discussed the essence of democracy in commemoration of International Democracy Day, September 15, every year. Thanks for being a part of it, and thanks to my guest, Henry Ekine, a legal practitioner. Henry, great having you here always. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for having me, Dayo. It's my pleasure to always be on the canvas.
Democracy is the way to go, and as Henry has said, we must do all that we can as citizens to defend and entrench the tenets and principles of a democratic society in ours. Many thanks for being a part of this once again. I'm Adedayo Ilushakin. Do have yourselves a wonderful day. Bye for now.